Browser is today evolving to be everyone's daily workspace. And the old boundaries between endpoint and browser security are now starting to blur. But they are still both crucial in different ways. The endpoint tools like your antivirus, your EDR, your system hardening, etc., they protect the entire device. But once you open that front door, the browser, that's where a whole new wave of threats greet you. You have your malicious JavaScript, you have phishing forms and software as a service applications. Are they complementary? Absolutely. You still need that device level defense because if malware ever lands on the machine, you need endpoint tools to quarantine it. But you also need browser native controls to catch that sneaky stuff that sails past your network. So, how aware are organizations? A surprising number still treat AI like another app rather than a new data exfiltration channel. I think data leakage via shadow AI is widespread and growing, and there's kind of a blurred line between personal and corporate tools, which kind of exacerbates the problem. One more very important characteristic is deliver continuous education. Your buyers are grappling with new threats monthly. It could be AI phishing, shadow AI, last mile web attacks, etc. So when you offer them ongoing value through micro learning, through threat intelligence newsletters or live demos of fresh attack techniques, when you become a trusted information source, you stay top of mind long after this time. Yeah, so these are some characteristics that can make a cybersecurity vendor stand out from their competitors in such a fragmented market.
All right, welcome back to the Be Fearless podcast. Our guest today has been at the forefront of one of the most important emerging security categories. Swetha Krishnamoorthi is an industry principal at Frost & Sullivan, and she has done groundbreaking work on zero trust browser security. Her work shapes how enterprises think about securing the browser, one of the biggest attack surfaces today. Her insights have been featured in publications like Tech Republic, Business Insider, and Channel Futures, and I'm really excited to be having this conversation with her today. Welcome to the show, Swetha.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome and the warm introduction.
Swetha, I wanted to start to, first introduce yourself to our audience. I know you've been at Frost & Sullivan for 8 years now. I'm curious, how did you get into the analyst field and how did you come to focus on cybersecurity?
Oh, it's an interesting story. I mean, cybersecurity or becoming a market research analyst was never part of my plan or, my childhood dream or anything. I was actually a biotechnology engineer. So I majored in biotechnology. And I was about to do all my aspirations were around, doing cutting edge research on DNA and, genetic engineering and stuff like that. So after my engineering, I was applying for some of the universities for my master's. Before I get my admissions, I thought I'll just go and do some IT work. So I joined an IT company. And from there onwards, I started getting interested in the IT side of things. So I learned network concepts. I learned about how languages work, how coding works and all that. And from there, I went on to do my MBA. After my MBA, interestingly, I was a consultant, an analytics consultant, not a cybersecurity consultant. So I was an analytics consultant at another firm. And from there, I got interested in market research. So as a consultant, I was working on, market research, pre-sales, which included a lot of customer journey analysis and all that, and which got me hooked into market research. And I got into my current firm, Frost & Sullivan. So that's how I became an analyst. Coming into cybersecurity was a pure chance. I never imagined that I would be a cybersecurity analyst because it so happened that my manager at that time, like almost 8 years ago, he wanted me to support on one of the cybersecurity projects because there was a shortage of hands. And my first topic was security awareness training. So that's how I got into cybersecurity, and it got me hooked. And I started learning more about the different concepts around security, the network security protocols, and all that. And then I went ahead and did a certification on certified information security manager. So currently, I am a certified information security manager from ISACA. And I started working on various topics ranging from endpoint security, SOAR, SIEM, Active Directory security, automated security validation, and now browser security. So it's been a very interesting journey so far.
That's awesome, Swetha. I didn't know that you came from a bioengineering background. I actually studied biochem as well in university. So it's funny how
Oh,
in cyber.
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of your most recent research, I know you've been looking at browser security for a long time. I'm curious what initially drew you to this emerging category. When did you first realize that browser security is, a distinct, security area that people need to look at?
Oh, so a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2023, along with our team, we were attending this conference, Info Security in London. So usually we attend these conferences to understand how the market is evolving, to understand what are the new technologies happening. So we have interactions with different vendors exhibiting there. We get to interact with security leaders and all that. And it so happened that in that particular year, there were a lot of new companies that focused on browser security, from different angles. Some of them approached it from an isolation perspective. Some of them approached it from, a browser native perspective, right? So it was so interesting because until then, it was not a very important topic. It was not a major topic. People were focusing on endpoint security, EDR, XDR, SIEMs, or those were kind of the major topics that the industry was looking into. And we started digging into it. We spoke to a few vendors, and then we realized that this is one of the most emerging topics. And I think one of the major reasons is also because I think 2023 was around the time when the pandemic had just gotten over, and companies were debating around if they should have work from office mandates or if they should continue working from home. So they were debating on this, and there were security implications for both of these scenarios, right? And that's when companies were also looking into securing the enterprise network, securing their corporate applications when an employee works from home. And that's where browser security came into picture. So it was interesting, and we captured that trend, and we decided that, okay, this is something we should be working on, and we should keep a track of. And that's how we started the Zero Trust Browser Security topic coverage. This time we are doing the second update of that particular study, which is scheduled to be published probably in the next 1 month. So it's an exciting market, and it's an emerging market. So I'm really glad we picked it up.
That's exciting. I mean, I hope that the release of the report will coincide with the release of this podcast. I think it will be very timely.
Yeah.
I mean, as you rightly said, the browser is becoming a major attack surface. A lot of initial access is happening through the browsers. But I think when it comes to organization, there's still quite a varying level of maturity. Why do you think for some customers, although they know there are some limitations with their SASE and SSEs, why do you think these security teams still have been a bit slow in adopting browser native security approaches?
This is a great question. And I think there are several interconnected reasons on why adoption has been slower than expected, despite, like you rightly mentioned, everyone agreeing that browser is the main attack surface today. The first reason I would say is what I call the legacy infrastructure trap. Organizations have had massive investments in infrastructure like SASE, SSE, or VDI over the past decade. And Now enterprises have entire teams built around managing these solutions. So there's a natural organization inertia, right? So although these tools work well enough, sometimes they don't. In certain situations, they don't. And most security teams are hesitant to add another layer or replace something they just spent a decade deploying, right? So, specifically, network based solutions have significant blind spots when it comes to last mile security. Things like real time typing, copy paste activities, or even AI agent interactions, right? So, organizations are at least right now reluctant to admit that there are these gaps existing because it means that they are acknowledging their security investments are incomprehensive, right? And the second important factor is user pushback. Now, I think one of the major challenges that browser security vendors is facing is that organizations, even though they purchase enterprise browser solutions, they deploy it only to around maybe 10 to 15 percentage of their workforce. Because employees refuse to switch from Chrome or Edge or Safari because that's their favorite browser. They have, browsers are incredibly sticky. People have their extensions, people have their bookmarks, passwords, workflows, everything. And even though there are dozens of free Chromium based browsers, we can see that Chrome still holds nearly 70% of the market share. So that shows how sticky people are to change. And if you have to look at full enterprise browser deployment, it requires a complete rip and replacement deployment, right? Which is a massive change management challenge for the organization. And even if you look at extension based solutions, that still requires pushing out new software, managing policies, and we all know that IT teams are already overwhelmed with dozens of tools, alert fatigue, and if you go and tell them that you're adding another solution, it just feels like one more thing to manage for them. So there's a lot of resistance from both end users and from IT teams to browser security solutions. But the most important factor, I would say, is the budget. Browser security does not have a dedicated budget line. Unlike your EDR, unlike your SIEM, it doesn't have a dedicated security budget. It comes out of endpoint, it comes out of network, or it comes out of DLP budgets. So when you're already paying for SASE or SSE, it's very hard to justify that you're spending more on what seems like overlapping capabilities, even if the solution is fundamentally different. So I think that these are some of the reasons why there is resistance in adopting browser security solutions. Although it's required, there is still awareness to be created on how these browser native solutions, security solutions, help organizations.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And this is very typical of any category creation, right? You're always met with, well, where would this budget come from? Is it a complement solution? Is it a replacement? But I think over time, hopefully, started to see, deployment gets improved. Like you very rightly said, the first generation of browser security solutions are dedicated browser, which are pretty much impossible for people to deploy unless you're a company that's full control on what people can access. And then now we start to have extension solutions that are, a little bit easier to deploy to MDMs, GPOs, IDPs, things like that. But hopefully with time, with better integrations with their SIM and things like that, the user experience, both from a, threat management perspective and a deployment perspective would be much, much easier. I know, Swetha, one of the areas that you used to cover as well was endpoint security. You mentioned in the beginning of this podcast. I'm curious, how do you see endpoint security evolving alongside browser security? Do you see it as more of a complementary tool, or is it going to converge eventually?
Okay, so browser is today evolving to be everyone's daily workspace. And the old boundaries between endpoint and browser security are now starting to blur. But they are still both crucial in different ways. First off, I think endpoints, you can probably imagine this analogy, right? You can think of endpoint security as your house alarm and browser security as your front door peephole, right? The endpoint tools like your antivirus, your EDR, your system hardening, etc., they protect the entire device. They stop malware, they patch vulnerabilities, they watch for suspicious processes, etc. But once you open that front door, the browser, that's where a whole new wave of threats greet you, right? You have your malicious JavaScript, you have phishing forms and software as a service applications, you have data siphoned off to AI chatbots. So browser security jumps in right at that moment, isolating untrusted sites, inspecting scripts, enforcing policies at the point of user interaction. Now, are they complementary? Absolutely. You still need that device level defense because if malware ever lands on the machine, you need endpoint tools to quarantine it. But you also need browser native controls to catch that sneaky stuff that sails past your network, right, or your endpoint. Things like you have last mile reassembly attacks today. You have encrypted traffic that's hiding harmful content. So all of these can be caught by browser security. I think at the same time, I'm also seeing some early signs of convergence. Some of the endpoint vendors are bundling browser extensions for isolation or script monitoring, so you don't have to rip and replace your users' favorite browsers. At the same time, I also see some browser security vendors, they are bundling a lightweight endpoint agent with their browser. So you get device telemetry and browser isolation in one client. So I think in real world deployments, many organizations take a hybrid approach. For example, for high risk groups, like if you're talking about executives or contractors on unmanaged devices, right? They roll out a dedicated secure browser in isolation mode alongside your EDR. For the rest of the workforce, they layer browser aware policies onto existing endpoints. So, kicking off a slow and steady shift towards a unified security client. So, I think looking ahead, the goal for many is a truly clientless model, which is like policy enforcement and threat prevention happening seamlessly at the browser level with endpoint intelligence feeding in behind the scenes. So I think that's how the market is going to evolve in the future.
No, that's an interesting perspective because we see a lot of, customers that want to deploy in BYOD where they probably can't deploy an EDR. And, one of the solutions that people often have is, hey, can the extension basically work with an IDP and a local agent to basically check if all the device postures are met before allowing them to access company resources. So I think there has been a lot of convergence in that aspect where, for a contractor or BYOD, you might not need a full-blown EDR, but you might just want to do some basic checks before they can access the, company resources. I know, Swetha, that you mentioned a lot of different types of web-based attacks in your research. I'm curious, have you seen any attack vectors that are particularly dangerous for enterprises or, particularly underspoken about?
Yeah, so when we talk about browser based threats, there are three attack vectors that stand out as both the most common and the most underestimated. So, first, I would say it's the targeted phishing in web applications. Everyone's familiar with email phishing, but today's attackers, they are moving into the browser itself. They will craft a meticulous login page that looks identical to your company's single sign-on portal, or embed a fake critical update banner inside a web application. I think probably a year ago there was this very popular Microsoft single sign-on phishing page. Right, there was a single sign-on page which clearly mimicked the Microsoft's page, and even the most experienced security analysts were not able to detect that it was not an authentic single sign-on page from Microsoft. Because employees trust familiar URLs and interfaces, it's very difficult for them to notice these subtle changes in the browser user interface. In fact, in some of my conversations with multiple vendors, a lot of them have reported that 60% of their detected phishing incidents originated not from email, but from in-browser overlays. And because these overlays execute in real time, traditional email filters and network proxies never see the payload. I think targeted phishing attacks in web applications is kind of the most important attack vector today. Secondly, I would say post encryption last mile web attacks. This is a recent phenomenon. So we hear HTTPS everywhere, right? And that's good. But it also blinds our network based controls. So attackers hide malicious scripts in encrypted traffic, break them into smaller chunks, and reassemble them in the browser's memory after decryption. Yes, you have encrypted pathways, you have everything set, but what happens when the malicious payload gets assembled after the decryption? It's very hard to detect it. And very few enterprises realize how prevalent this has become. In fact, one of the security researcher that I spoke with said that 40% of the new threats that they blocked were delivered via encrypted streams, which bypass the organization's SASE stack. Right, so teams are often so confident in their TLS inspection that they overlook this last mile reassembly gap entirely. So I think this is one of the most recent emerging attack vector, the last mile web attack, which a lot of organizations are still unaware of or have not taken seriously. And I think lastly, malicious or fake digital assets. That's kind of another attack vector that I would like to highlight. So with the rise of low code or no code frameworks and AI generated content, attackers are shipping malicious JavaScript libraries, compromised packages, or fake PDF viewer extensions. Now, these assets may look legitimate, complete with proper version numbers, documentation, etc., but may carry Trojan files, which can exfiltrate session tokens once loaded in the browser. So, in fact, in one of the incidents, a Fortune 500 company unknowingly pulled in a malicious analytics script from a compromised CDN, which siphoned user credentials over weeks before detection. So now what are enterprises overlooking? It's, attacks like these, which can seem very safe because we have all the controls in place and, we have encryption, we have, we are looking in the wrong places. But these are some attack vectors that most enterprises should be cognizant of and can really affect at the browser layer.
No, it's really interesting that you brought up last mile reassembly, and I'm very happy because our research team was the one who disclosed it at DEF CON. I don't know if you know that, but I'm really glad that it had reached you. But it's definitely been a space that is, worrying a lot of more, I guess, early adopters of browser security. I think people are seeing malicious files being bypassing SWIGs completely. And you very rightly said, a lot of these solutions, they solve it by essentially disabling certain browser features that are required for things like, this call probably right now, right? So I think to be a solution that balances, productivity and allowing people to still use the newest SaaS features in the browser, but still keep them safe through detection and mitigation. It's really interesting that you brought up these threats. I think another space that I have to bring up is just AI, right? Like, how do you think, the existence of AI, whether that's agentic AI or just LLMs, have affected the way people are being targeted in the browser?
Yeah, so training users, right? That used to be our go-to defense. make them the human firewall, teach them to spot bad grammar or dodgy links, right? But with AI powered phishing, that model is really showing its cracks. First off, routine training barely moves the needle anymore. Attackers are using generative AI, to probably bypass the old red flags. We used to talk about perfect grammar, personalized context, so that users learn to watch for basically everything that could be wrong. But now with AI powered phishing attacks, it's just 5 minutes and 5 phishing campaigns, and that's it, done. Immediately removes all the classic symptoms which AI generated phishing campaigns can bypass. So I think that is one of the most important way in which AI is influencing attacks. And how are enterprises responding, or how should enterprises respond to AI, or probably leverage AI for your protection, right? So you can use real-time AI detection in the browser. So you can embed AI threat engines into the browser itself. So these models analyze page content, analyze URLs, form submissions, and it's like having a dedicated phishing sensor in every tab. And you can also use continuous simulation and micro learning. So you can probably use AI generated phishing simulations instead of annual trainings directly in the user's workflow. So, for example, a quick one question quiz when they open their inbox, follow that with immediate contextual feedback. So, this ensures that the awareness is on top of mind without any burnout. And you can also use AI to automate your incident response, right? You integrate detection tools with your SOAR platform, with your EDR platforms, so that, anytime a user or a system detects an attack, it automatically triggers that workflow, and you don't have to, go through 5 different manual tools or 5 different manual dashboards to get the workflow processed. Yeah, so these are some ways in which you can use AI to actually, stay ahead of your attackers.
No, I think that's a great point, right? AI is sort of like a double-edged sword. And I think another interesting use
Yes.
case that we've seen on AI supporting security is, DLP. Like traditionally, people have relied on regex, hated it, but now you can use basically nano models and pages to detect things that could be sensitive, right? Very similarly, we use it to simulate different user personas to see how, malicious extensions behave at runtime. So there's a lot of creative ways to use agentic and, just traditional AI. Speaking of DLP, it's an area that people are worried about, right? When it comes to using Gen AI, people maybe potentially copy pasting sensitive data into it. How widespread do you think this DLP problem is in reality? And how are companies dealing with what we call shadow AI?
Oh, data leakage into AI tools is already a runaway train. And most organizations haven't even realized that the rails are missing. In fact, let's talk scale. One of the recent reports that I read found that a massive 77% of employees admit that they paste corporate data into generative AI prompts. And a huge majority, almost more than 80% of those prompts go to unsanctioned accounts. So that means things like, your customer list, your source code snippets, or even your IP rights or your internal reports. These are all slipping out through personal chat GPT or Gemini sessions, entirely outside IT's view. I mean, IT leaders know that it's a problem. In fact, 90% of them say that they are worried about shadow AI, and almost more than 40% of them actually report that the data leaks from employee AI use have sometimes financial or reputational fallout, right? Worrying and knowing are two different things. Many companies only start paying attention after an incident, like when a developer has accidentally fed a proprietary chip design code into a public LLM and see it surface in another user's response, right? So the risk isn't theoretical. It's like, I think Cisco recently released a report which said 46% of organizations have already detected sensitive data leakage through generative AI interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And because AI inference doesn't look like a standard file transfer, there's no big file download or upload to flag.
Yeah.
Traditional DLP and network controls often miss them entirely. So, how aware are organizations? A surprising number still treat AI like another app rather than a new data exfiltration channel. They block unsanctioned cloud storage, but they don't block browser copy paste into AI chat windows.
Mm-hmm.
They monitor file shares, but they don't monitor send to chat GPT actions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think Zero Trust Browser Security's DLP features come into play, right? By enforcing clipboard controls right at the browser level, you can prevent sensitive text like your PII or credit card numbers or any NDA content from ever hitting an AI prompt. You can also detect AI tool usage via extension policies or inline from inspections, flagging or blocking access to known AI endpoints. So, to sum it up, I think data leakage via shadow AI is widespread and growing. And there's kind of a blurred line between personal and corporate tools, which kind of exacerbates the problem. So, most organizations are only partially aware of the risk until something blows up.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned, AI agents that could go rogue and exfiltrate data basically without user involvement, right? So I feel like even the most basic, DLP functions on setting guardrails on users, it's a topic people talk about, but it's a lot of people are
Yeah.
still processing how they want to solve it because ideally you do want a solution that can allow people to still use AI tools, but just, have some restrictions when it comes to sensitive data. But yeah, speaking of AI agents, OpenAI just released ChatGPT Atlas last week. We've also seen an emergence of AI browsers like Comet, the Dia browser, even, Chrome released Gemini in Chrome, right? How do you think this changes the threatscape in the browser and consequently enterprise security requirements?
AI powered browsers and agents are actually a real game changer. They are like having a supercharged assistant, right? They can fetch data, summarize reports, or even write code for you. But from a security standpoint, they also introduce a brand new set of challenges. First off, these AI agents often require deep permissions to operate. So they need to read pages, they need to interact with forms, they sometimes even have access to local files and credentials. So which expands the attack surface dramatically. Imagine a malicious actor compromising an AI extension that's installed with full browser privileges. They could pivot from that agent into every web app you use. They could steal tokens, session cookies across your entire environment. Now, secondly, most of these AI browsers are constantly communicating with external LLM endpoints. That encrypted channel looks a lot like any other HTTPS traffic. So, network proxies or SASE stacks simply cannot inspect it. So, attackers can hide malicious prompts or payloads inside those streams, then trigger them client side via the AI agent. So, it's essentially a last mile reassembly attack, right? But now with AI driven code snippets or malicious data transformations. Now, the third thing is these agents can automate complex workflows. So they can log into apps, they can download reports, they can email them out. So if an attacker hijacks one, they get an automated high speed foothold. So instead of a human manually clicking through a phishing link, the compromised agent can execute a scripted sequence of actions across multiple software as a service platforms at machine speed. So, what does this mean for enterprise security? First, most organizations they need fine-grained browser control, right? So you need the ability to sandbox or isolate AI agent extensions separately from the normal browser tabs. So you have to treat them like privileged micro virtual machines. limiting what they can read or write. And then you need to have behavioral monitoring. So traditional EDR looks at process behaviors, but now you need browser native analytics that can spot the difference between normal AI agent interactions and anomalous ones. And third, you need encrypted traffic inspection at the client level, not at the channel level. So, network tools cannot see inside the AI streams. So your secure browser must decrypt and analyze your in-flight requests and responses. So that way, you can detect if the AI agent is fetching malicious prompts or exfiltrating sensitive data under the guise of routine API calls. And fourthly, you need to have zero trust integration. You have to apply zero trust policies specifically to AI agents. Ensure that there is continuous re-authentication for any sensitive operations. Enforce least privilege access to software as a service apps. And, segment agent traffic from general browsing. So if an AI agent is compromised, you want to contain it quickly. So that's how it works. So in short, I think AI browsers and agents, it's a great innovation. It's a great next step. They turn the browser not just into a display layer, but an active execution platform. Mm-hmm. So which means defending that platform should also require multiple layers. You need to combine isolation, you need to combine client-side inspection, behavioral intelligence, zero trust controls, etc., to ensure that you stay ahead of attackers.
No, that's really interesting. I know for the longest time, people always say employees are the weakest link, right? You talk about security training and all that, but now your AI agents have become the newest weakest link, right? Like they're never trained to be security aware. We've seen actually quite a few, not just AI browsers, but just, AI agent extensions and, a lot of other agents that fall into, let's say, a consent grant attack, providing access to a user's Google Drive to the attacker. But, from the user perspective, it's like, well, I gave it a task and then I went for coffee. When I came back, the task was completed. So even they don't know that they have been compromised in the process, right? So that really makes threat hunting very, very interesting, because now you have these autonomous agents that you can't speak to understand what happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of, the different browser security solutions, I'm sure as part of your report, you had spoken to many of them. What are the characteristics that you've seen separates the leaders in the space versus, those that are perhaps still developing their capabilities?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So, when we looked at all the zero trust browser security vendors, the ones who really stood out, they didn't just build another browser add-on, right, or a bolt-on. They thought about the whole experience from day one. So first, they make it invisible to the user. Mm-hmm. So instead of throwing up scary blocked screens or forcing you to switch browsers, most of the top vendors, they quietly monitored everything in the background. Users barely noticed that there was a security solution running in the background, but this solution behind the scenes was watching tabs open, watching scripts run, watching all the data flow patterns, and they were catching bad stuff even before anyone saw it. Secondly, they learn as they go. So in fact, imagine your browser is getting smarter every time it spots a weird site, or there is a suspicious paste into an AI chat window. So the most of the leaders bake AI and machine learning right into their clients. So they adapt to your company's habits, they adapt to your users' habits. What does that imply? It implies that there are fewer false alarms. There are more real threats caught. So it kind of makes the job easier even for the admins, right? Instead of going through hundreds and thousands of alerts and alarms to identify the real threats, it kind of reduces their workload. And the third thing that set them apart was they offered just right controls. It was not like, they had a blunt block everything approach. They gave security teams fine-tune knobs, right? So maybe you isolate high-risk users in a lockdown browser, whereas others only get warned gently if they try to paste credit card numbers into Google Gemini, right? So that flexibility means that they actually roll it out to 100% of the employees instead of just 10%. So because people aren't fighting the tool, so there's more adoption, there's less resistance from the users, which makes the whole program more successful. Following up with that, it's also because most of the zero trust browser security vendors, they play well with the others. What I mean by others is, most of these security solutions, their consoles integrate seamlessly with your other solutions, your existing security infrastructure, like, your identity provider, your SIEM, your endpoint tools, or even your SOA workflows. So when the browser actually spots a malicious file download or a rogue AI agent, it can automatically create an alert, revoke a token, or quarantine that session. So there's less workload for the administrators. And it's not a siloed environment. It's not a point solution. It works well with other solutions. So I think these are kind of the four important characteristics that set apart the leaders from the ones from the other vendors.
No, I totally agree with you. I think it's all about how to make life easier for not just the security, but the end users as well, right? And what I realized is, a lot of companies, they know they probably need some form of browser security solution, but because existing tools don't provide them with the monitoring capabilities, they don't know what policies they need. So, when you come in and basically tell them, hey, we'll tell you, we'll monitor your users, we won't block anything first, and then we'll show you a threat landscape. And based off that, here are the custom policies that we created for you and recommend, because every organization, to your point, is so different. Forget an organization, like different departments have different needs, right? So it has to be catered to that for companies to still be productive, given it is the place where the majority of time is spent today for organizations. On that, I know we talked about user experience, but, the cybersecurity landscape is really crowded, not just in browser security, but in general. We see startups come up all the time. What advice would you give to solution providers who want to differentiate themselves in a noisy market?
Yeah, so I think in a market which you rightly mentioned, it's overflowing with cybersecurity vendors, right? So the ones that really stand out are not actually the loudest. They are actually the most clear, empathetic, and focused ones. So if you want to rise above the noise, I think the first point that I would like to emphasize is pick one fight and win it. Trying to be everything to everyone just blend you into the background, right? So the leaders we studied, not just within zero trust browser security, but across all the other categories as well, they all had a tightly defined sweet spot. So it could be like, stopping in browser phishing overlays, or preventing AI data exfiltration, or delivering seamless isolation. But there was just one problem that they addressed, and that clarity makes your message crisp. This is exactly what we solve, and we solve it better than anyone else. That's a better message to send across compared to, we solve everything. We are the solution that you need. We are the only solution that can replace everything. I think the second most important characteristic is you should show real measurable impact. Security teams are already drowning in dashboards, alerts, but they need proof that you will reduce risk. Instead of glossy marketing, share customer stories with hard numbers. You can say things like, we cut unauthorized AI tool data leaks by 80% in 3 months. Or something like, we reduced phishing click-throughs from 12% to 1% in a single quarter. So these outcomes resonate far more than the feature list. So you can have thousands of features, thousands of capabilities, but today today's leaders are looking only at outcomes. They want to prove to their upper management that their investments were worth it. There is a return on their investments. And third, I would say invest in user experience. I think that's kind of the most important point. And when I say user experience, it's not just for the end user, it's also for the IT administrator and the security analyst. Yes, if you're talking about zero trust browser security, your browser agent must be lightweight and invisible so employees don't push back. But your admin console and deployment process also matter just as much, right? So the vendors who sold had plug and play interactions with endpoints, identity providers, scenes, and ticketing systems. So if your product still feels like a point solution that lives in its own silo, then you will struggle to make the case. So I think it's more probably just one more very important characteristic is deliver continuous education. Your buyers are grappling with new threats monthly. It could be AI phishing, shadow AI, last mile web attacks, etc. So when you offer them ongoing value through micro learning, through threat intelligence newsletters or live demos of fresh attack techniques, when you become a trusted information source, you stay top of mind long after the state. Yeah, so these are some characteristics that can make a cybersecurity vendor stand out from their competitors in such a fragmented market, in such a very confusing market.
No, I think you're right, especially for detection and response, right? People want to work with a vendor that tells them what the emerging threat is before their peers get breached. People always ask us, why do you invest in such a large security research team? And it's precisely that, right? Like nobody wants to work with an emerging threatscape with somebody who just reacts whenever there's a breach. But I also really like your point on, just long feature lists. When I was evaluating companies back in BC, we always ask them, what do you think your product differentiator is? And it's almost like a trick question because everyone would go to these like esoteric long list of features. But honestly, everybody can build a feature that their competitor doesn't have. But the question is, do customers care about those features? Are they the one or two features that they want you to do the best in class? So I think that's a really great point that you brought up there. Another kind of, if we flip the switch a little bit, what questions do you think security leaders should be asking when they're evaluating, zero trust browser security solutions? As to your point, there's everybody saying different things on what sort of features you need to have.
Yeah, I think it's good that we spoke about the long feature list, right? So typically, anytime you kind of evaluate a security solution, security leaders generally have a long checklist of sorts, and they'll try to evaluate each vendors into those checklists, right? On a high level, I think it's very important to look into three big areas. The first one I would say is, visibility into the invisible. So picture this, a user switches to a new tab and there's a code that silently executes. Maybe it's fetching AI prompts or reassembling malicious scripts after HTTPS decryption. So as a security buyer, your first question should be, can you show me exactly what's happening in each open tab, down to clipboard paste and decrypted traffic? Now, the true zero trust browsers, they don't just log network calls. They monitor every DOM event, script load, form submission in real time. If your vendor cannot demo that live visibility, say drilling into a suspicious paste in ChatGPT or spotting a hidden iframe, you've found your blind spot. So it's very important that your security vendor is able to exactly demo you how they are able to catch the invisible. So what are the things that you are not seeing, but they can see using their tool? So that's a very important aspect that security leaders should look into when they are investing in zero trust browser security. The second important point is frictionless rollout and adoption. So, in my opinion, security tools should protect, not disrupt, right? So you should ask, how does this slip into our environment? Do my people need to switch browsers, wrestle with constant pop-ups, should they endure ticket storms, as administrators? So the security leaders, from the vendor landscape that we have seen, they integrate invisibly. They learn your normal browsing patterns to cut false positives. They offer inline warnings instead of full blocks, and they tie into your existing SIEM or source systems, or even identity provider workflows. So, which means there is 100% adoption across your workforce, which is, I think, this is one point that I keep re-emphasizing again and again, because it's more important to have your browser security deployed across your full workforce rather than just 10 to 15% of your user base, because that's when you see the real success of your program, right? It's not when you have only a portion of your users protected. If you need to have your entire workforce protected, only then the program becomes a success. And I think the third point that I would highlight, and this is one point that we at Frost & Sullivan, we always look into. In fact, our competitive benchmarking radar, the Frost radar that we have developed, it not only evaluates vendors on the basis of their product features or product capabilities, but we also look at the future proof of their business as a whole. So I think even as a buyer, it is important to ensure that the vendor that you're investing in is future proof. So because, the web is evolving, there are AI agents, there are new encrypted protocols, you name it. You'll want to challenge vendors on their roadmap. How will you handle AI-driven browser extensions or encrypted data streams that bypass any network tools? So look for promises of maybe client-side AI analytics or open APIs for sharing threat intelligence, and look for a track record of rapid innovation updates. So if their plan is, we'll build a feature later, that's a red flag. The companies that matter are already running AI-powered anomaly detection in their clients, and they are pushing updates weekly. So it's very important that, especially in the security space, it's very important that vendors are rapidly evolving and rapidly innovating. They should have agile innovation processes in place. To sum it up, I think really you're asking, what can you see that I can't? How smoothly will you protect me? And how ready are you for tomorrow's threats? So if you are able to nail those three areas, you will quickly be able to identify the true zero trust browser security leaders and identify your winner.
No, I think that's really a great summary. I mean, nobody expected the browser to be such a hot space with AI browsers right now, right? For the longest time, Chrome was the dominant player. You start to get all these new, players and features, which all introduce new security threats. So it's really important that your vendor is just compatible out of the box with all of these solutions and make sure that they're aware of, what they can do with the upcoming features from Atlas and Comet and all these players. And I also really like how you emphasize, understanding how people are solving the problem, not just going through a checklist. Do they solve last mile reassembly attacks? Well, are they solving it by inspecting it, or are they just blocking the channels that it's happening through? Right. So I think that's very critical to dig a layer deeper and challenge vendors on how they actually do things rather than just giving them a security questionnaire. One of the other things that your report highlighted is that 34% of American workforce works from home on an average day now. Besides zero trust browser security solutions, if we move away from that for a little while, what else can CISOs do to reduce the attack surface that come with hybrid work?
Right. So I think first, treat every device like it's untrusted. If someone connects from a home PC, you don't know what's running under the hood. You could have old browsers, you could have missing patches, you could have random extensions. So it's very important to enforce strict conditional access. Ensure that, you require up-to-date endpoints, device certificate checks, and I can't stress this enough, but multi-factor authentication every time someone logs in. Pair that with an EDR or an XDR agent. So you're continuously monitoring for suspicious behavior, even on personal or bring your own device machines. And the second is segment and isolate your crown threats. So instead of giving every remote user broad network access, carve out microsegments for critical systems. For your finance applications or your IP protected resources, HR databases. Get them behind additional checks or isolated browser sessions. So think of it as a virtual airlock around your most sensitive workloads. So this way, even if a laptop is compromised, an attacker cannot just pivot laterally to every corporate asset. So it's very important to segment and isolate your crowd threats. And the third, I think the most important point I would say is lock down the home environment. Encourage secure Wi-Fi setups. Ensure that there are strong router passwords. There are encrypted SSIDs. Offer employees a curated list of vetted VPN or SASE clients, that can handle or that can encrypt all traffic back to corporate. There's not a single tool that you can use to kind of address the risk of, the growing work from home population, right? Because most of these workforce can log in from not just their home network, but even from a coffee shop, even from an airport, which has very weak security or very weak Wi-Fi secure protocols. So it's very important to layer your defenses, and beyond tooling, it's very important to also provide continuous security education tailored to remote work. Phishing simulations, tips for spotting fake Wi-Fi networks, or even guidance on securing shared family devices, right? So ensure that you layer in multiple layers. Like, you can have regular vulnerability scans of publicly exposed home IPs. So at the end of the day, I would say hybrid work demands a zero trust everywhere mindset, not just a zero trust at the corporate level or at your perimeter level. So you have to verify every login, you have to isolate every session, and you have to secure every network path. It could be your corporate office, it could be your coffee shop, it could be someone's kitchen table. It doesn't matter. You need to adopt a zero trust mindset for, addressing the remote work security risks.
Looking into the growth opportunities you've looked at in your research, where do you think the zero trust browser security landscape is heading in the next 2-3 years? What capabilities do you think will become table stakes versus differentiators in the long run?
Over the next couple of years, I think the zero trust browser security market is really gearing up for some big shifts. Right now it's just an emerging market, but even in the last 2 years, the innovations, the kind of technological changes that have happened has been really massive. So traditionally, I would say browser security focused on just isolating risky sites, right, and doing basic data loss prevention. But that is going to be table stakes now. That's going to be a basic hygiene factor right now. So every solution will have to offer seamless browser isolation, real-time monitoring of everything that's going on inside each tab, and clipboard level controls that keep sensitive information from leaking into AI chat windows. Plus, integration with identity systems and security dashboards will be an absolute must. But here's where things get interesting, right? The true game changers will be those vendors who bring real AI smarts right into the browser itself. So imagine your browser automatically learning what normal looks like for your users, spotting when something's off, or like a tab suddenly firing off a ton of API requests, or there's an unexpected file download. And I think better yet, the browsers will not just alert you, they will act. They will spin up clean microenvironments, they will revoke dangerous tokens, and they will quarantine suspicious sessions all on their own. That's where the market is heading. That kind of automation, it saves a ton of headache for security teams, not just in terms of workload, but also in terms of reducing the risk levels. And then you have got the bigger vision, solutions that don't need a bulky browser or a bulky browser extension, but can enforce zero trust policies transparently at the network's edge or through DNS level controls. Now, combine that with a community network where enterprises share anonymized threat data in real time, and suddenly your security updates themselves without waiting on patch cycles. So, what we are really looking at is a future where basic isolation and DLP are kind of like the price of admission. And the winners will be those who bring AI driven detection, automated response, and open collaboration front and center. And do it all while keeping the user experience smooth and invisible. So those are the companies rewriting the rules. So, and that's where I think the browser security market is headed.
I totally agree with you. I think DLP and access controls are good entry points for many companies. It's usually what gets them or leads them to browser security in the first place. But as you rightly say, at some point, the policies will plateau. Everybody will have the same features, and it's, so just control space, right? So as long as you have those, it's pretty much similar to everyone. Where it really differentiates is, are you able to defend against the latest and greatest threats and react quick when that happens? But Swetha, I really enjoyed speaking to you. Our audience must want to see more of your work. So what can we expect in terms of research in the next 12 months?
Oh, so the next 12 months is really a far timeline. We are in the security market, so anything can change in 6 months. So, but yeah, we are in the process of finalizing our topic coverage for next year. But right now, apart from the Zero Trust browser security research that is set to be released in November, end of November, I'm also working on automated security validation, which is another favorite topic of mine. And that's also about to be published by the end of this year. So I have two amazing analysts who work with me on this topic as well. And it's been a fun conversation with all the vendors, all the thought leaders in the space. So that's another topic that we are planning to publish probably in the next couple of months. And we will have more updates on other topics that would be done. There are other amazing work done by my colleagues, like, managed security, MSSP studies, and AI security. There are a host of other topics that are lined up for the next year. So, yeah, a lot of interesting coverage areas.
Really excited to read them, Swetha. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I think our listeners will agree with me that you're a very thoughtful responder. So really, really glad to have you on the Be Fearless podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swetha.